My name's Becky. I'm a project manager at Julie's Bicycle. I'm a white woman in my 30s with long brown hair. I'm wearing a black sleeveless top today, and I've also got quite a boring creamy white background behind me. Nothing exciting, unfortunately. I'm just going to share my screen. I've got a few slides to begin with about Julie's Bicycle. Hopefully you can see those clearly. And then I'll just touch on digital impacts and a bit of an introduction to those within the cultural sector. So for those of you that are not familiar with Julie's Bicycle, our vision is a creative community that powers action on climate change. So Julie's Bicycle are a charity. We were founded back in 2007 from within the UK music industry to respond to the climate crisis. We now work globally across the entire creative sector to reduce emissions and catalyse the green creative economy. So our objectives as an organisation are that arts and culture are net zero carbon, that arts and culture restore nature, inspire public action and champion climate justice as well. So we offer support and advice to those who share our vision, and we empower the creative sector to take practical action which is founded in science. We also advocate to and for culture to publicly speak out on these issues and using creativity to inspire audiences, influence each other and also the wider movement at this really crucial time in tackling both the dual crises of the climate and the ecological crisis. So our work at Julie's Bicycle builds a movement really at the intersection of culture, environmental science and action on climate. So combining these two areas of expertise enable us to fill this space. So we bring people together to allow us to understand what the sector knows and doesn't know and respond through a combination of elements. So we deliver training, consultancy, a rich programme of events, resources and thought leadership. But importantly, we work across the whole ecology of the sector. So we work with individual artists, organisations and the sector as a whole. And through this approach, we scale our learning to lead an overall sector shift by informing policy and also lobbying for change. So I'm just going to share a few examples of our work to bring that to life. First of all, our Creative Climate Leadership course. This is a 6-day intensive course which enables participants to apply environmental frameworks and targets such as the UN Sustainable Development Goals, meaningly to artistic work, and really explore what leadership means in the current context of the climate crisis. So this is a really evolving programme. We've now got a really growing exciting network of alumni from lots of different countries. This year we've got courses in Sweden and many more places coming up over the next few years. We run our consultancy programme Creative Green. Here we work really closely with cultural organisations and individual artists to really embed sustainability, explore what sustainability means within values, policy and business strategy, everything from procurement through to education and outreach and communications and creative programming. We're an active part of a number of networks and campaigns, and this is really about scaling action across the cultural sector. So for example, we have campaigns such as Music Declares Emergency, Vision 2025, which is bringing together the outdoor events and festivals industries to work together to share resources, best practice and learning around what's working for the sector. One of our big programmes is the Arts Council Environmental Programme. This is really a world first policy programme which has really galvanised change across arts and culture. So one of the strands to the programme is the Accelerator programme, which both Victoria and Fast Familiar are a part of. And that programme is aimed at supporting sector leadership to further develop sustainable practice, create new insights for the sector, empower organisations to support each other through peer exchange on specific topics, and some of the projects that you'll be seeing today are part of that programme. So that's really exciting. A few things that we have going on at Julie's Bicycle at the moment. We've just launched a briefing on food and drink sustainability. So that's a briefing that's available on our webpage. We've also just launched a guide on creative climate justice, but do sign up to our bulletin for updates on our events and everything that we have going on. We have lots and lots and lots of things going on, so do have a look there. I'm very excited to be able to share with you our Creative Climate Justice Hub. This is launched this week, and this is it's a library of climate justice resources curated for arts and culture. So it's really for people that want to understand the systemic causes of the climate crisis, how it intersects, how the cultural and climate crisis is really intersects with social and economic and environmental injustices, and how arts and culture are responding to that challenge. So it's a really, really rich resource. You can explore different themes, different curated content, and I've put the address up there, but I'll share some links in the chat for you once I finish speaking. So moving on to sustainable digital creativity, I'm just going to introduce some kind of an overview of digital impacts and why they matter. So as Victoria mentioned when she started off, basically digital impacts are one of those areas that have largely gone under the radar when it comes to environmental reporting and sustainability. They're very much less commonly included in organisational strategies and action plans, and there are various reasons for this. Digital is certainly one of the more complicated and difficult areas to measure, but also in terms of how we think about our impacts, digital emissions are they're somewhat invisible. So when we use a car, we're very conscious of the fact that we have to put fuel inside it to make it run. We see the visible impacts from the exhaust and the emissions. In some cases, we feel the impacts on our air pollution in cities and other places. But with digital, we're so used to using the internet, we're so used to using our devices. We don't commonly think about how they work, how those impacts are connected globally, and how the impacts affect our climate and environmentally and socially. So this is clear, the numbers on here. This is basically splitting out digital impacts, what they are and where they come from. I'm getting some feedback. Can everyone please?
Would you mind muting if you're not muted already? Thanks, everyone. Just searching.
Thank you. So broadly speaking, when we're measuring carbon impacts of digital, they're split into those from the ICT sector. So that includes things like the devices that we use, the impacts that come with manufacturing those devices, the networks that transmit our data. So that's the big data centers that store all of the data that we have in the cloud, that host all of the information on the internet so that we can access it 24/7. Then we have the entertainment and media sector, and that's measured separately, but it includes streaming entertainment such as TV, gaming, and things like newspapers. So you can see here that the total life cycle carbon footprint of the ICT sector is equivalent to around 1.4% of global greenhouse gas emissions, but about 4% of electricity use. But in the entertainment sector, that's an additional 1.2% of global emissions and 3% of global electricity. What does that mean in tangible terms? What does it mean in context? If the internet was a country, in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, it would be the 6th largest polluter. And if the IT sector were a country, it would be the third highest consumer of electricity after the USA and China. So that kind of puts those percentages a little bit more into perspective in terms of global impacts. But really crucially, the thing to note is that it's one of the sectors that's growing. So in terms of global emissions, lots of sectors are starting to decarbonize, but the digital impacts are growing as more and more people become connected to the internet. More and more people are consuming devices faster and faster, and that includes all of the minerals that go into making them, that come with their own set of environmental and social impacts in the mining and distribution of those, and the life cycle impacts as well when we think about digital waste. So to just break down those impacts a little bit further and think about how that relates to you and your cultural practices. Devices are a really good place to start. The impacts there come from the energy of using the devices themselves, and then the e-waste. So e-waste is a huge, huge problem. So one of the first places to start is to really think about your procurement strategy around digital devices. Can you source your devices from recycled materials or secondhand? And do you have a solution in place for end of life and how they can go on to a second life rather than into the growing pile of e-waste which we have globally? Thinking about how you store your digital data, thinking about the online service providers that you use. So what are their sustainability policies around renewable energies, for example? Where is your web page hosted? How is your web page designed? These are all questions that you can start thinking about. And I'm not going to go into those areas in a lot of detail because Dan is going to, and Joe are going to be speaking with some practical solutions for you. But if you do want to read more into these areas, understanding digital impacts, we have this guide on our website. It's called Environmental Sustainability in the Digital Age of Culture, and it goes into detail about all of those impact areas and what you can do to tackle them. So I hope that's a useful introduction for you, and I'll pass back to Victoria.
Thanks, Becky. That was so helpful. I think I'll just hand straight up to Dan, if that's okay, and then we'll have some questions after that.
Hello, everyone. My name's Dan. I am a white man in his middle age. I have black glasses, black hair, black facial hair. I'm wearing a white Mickey Mouse t-shirt, and I'm in a rehearsal room with black curtains kind of behind me. Joe, do you want to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Joe. I'm in my mid-20s, rapidly getting older. I am a white man sitting in a very boring room and wearing a baseball hat and a striped jumper, mainly to cover my very long hair at the moment.
Oh, thank you. So I'm just going to share my screen in a sec. Here we go. Cool. Hopefully you can all see that okay. Great. So just to say, we are talking today, but we're 2/3 of Fast Familiar. Rachel Briscoe is also an absolutely core element of, she just isn't with us today. Fast Familiar is a UK-based digital art studio. We're an award-winning interdisciplinary collaboration, and we comprise expertise in participatory theatre, game design, digital technology, and neuroscience and psychology, and we're based in Reading. We make artworks and tools which are participatory, playful, and socially engaged. We create spaces to explore questions which are too complex for daily life, and where audiences can rehearse better outcomes for a world where no decision of significance is taken by an isolated individual. We're really interested in how digital tech can enable new forms of human connection in a rapidly changing world. The Guardian said that we pioneered a hybrid form that's its own thing entirely, and that we make participatory stories that feel distinctly theatrical. In this talk, it has 3 parts. We're going to start with some case study interviews that we did with artists who are doing fascinating things in the field of digital technology and ecology. Then I'm going to talk about some of the efforts that Fast Familiar have made in terms of making our own projects more environmentally friendly. And then finally, Joe's going to talk about this tool that we created to help organizations and artists plan and measure their artistic activities in the way that they relate to the digital, I guess. Just this is kind of just to sort of try and fit in with the theme of this week as well. I just thought I'd touch a little bit on some of the work that we do around healthcare, because I thought that might be of interest to some people. So we collaborate quite often with healthcare organizations. The Doctor's Assistant, which the picture here you can see is from, is a public engagement scenario game exploring near futures of data-driven healthcare, which helps researchers inform their work with public perceptions around artificial intelligence. It was commissioned by the Wellcome EPSRC Centre for Interventional and Surgical Sciences and University College London Hospital's Biomedical Research Centre. I find that health people have long names, but I'm going to do my best to get my mouth around them. Another piece we did was called The Window, which is an immersive audio experience blending story, music, and spatial sound, which was the recipient of one of Alzheimer's Research UK's inaugural Inspire Awards, and we collaborated with the MRC Unit for Lifelong Health and Ageing to create that one. And then finally, When Harm Happens was an experiential training tool to help clinical professionals prepare for the potentially devastating consequences of critical incidents with a focus on midwifery. And that we did with King's College London and Guy's and St Thomas's Foundation Trust. So we're kind of really interested in the healthcare sector, and we find it a fascinating sort of area to work in. Okay. Cool. We've been working over the past year or so on a project called The Network Condition, which is about the environmental impact of digital cultural production. And it's part of a Julie's Bicycle and Arts Council England Accelerator project. So we've been working with Becky from Julie's Bicycle on that. And we did it as part of a consortium with Abandoned Normal Devices and Arts Catalyst. And I know that certainly someone from Abandoned Normal Devices is here as well. So if I say anything wrong, Sinead, feel free to unmute yourself and come in and correct me. Yeah, so the project has involved attempts for us as organizations to lower the impact of our own digital work in all 3 organizations, and a series of case studies and a tool that we'll talk about later. Okay. So Joe, over to you.
Thanks. I think Becky talked about this a bit earlier, but we decided to embark on the Network Condition project because we were very aware of some of the challenges faced by digital arts, especially as we're situated within them. And these include the environmental impacts that are often quite hidden away. Ara Madari recently wrote that digital technology has ushered in an age of inconspicuous consumption. And it's very easy to understand the impact of buying stuff physically or flying across the Atlantic, but it's much, much harder to wrap your head around how much energy it takes to fly data across the web. Also, many commonly used platforms that we're very used to now, such as Zoom, are not necessarily transparent about their impacts. And digital arts are very dependent on electricity. Digital arts are dependent on mining, and often some of the most poorest and most conflict-stricken areas of the world. And also, some of the most trendiest new things like NFTs or machine learning are actually incredibly, incredibly polluting.
Cool. So I'm going to move on to talk about some of the case studies that we did as part of the Network Condition project, because I think it's just really inspiring to see what artists are doing with this subject matter. And some of these case studies are artists who are making work to lower their own impact, and others are making work to really expose the impact that there is in the digital sector. Some of those impacts that Becky was talking about earlier, these artists are working to make that really kind of felt and visceral in some ways. So first case study I wanted to talk about, and these are all available on one of the consortium partners' websites, and we can post links later, or Sinead can post some now if she'd like to. First is this project called Anatomy of an AI by Kate Crawford and Vladan Joler. And this piece breaks down the Amazon echo as an anatomical map of human labor, data and planetary resources. So Vladan painstakingly researched all of the materials, the human labor and the data that went into one Amazon Echo device, visiting many of the locations and meeting many of the humans involved along the way. And it's also very beautiful in the way that it's been done, as you can probably see in the image. So I'm just going to tell you some of the sort of key things that he said in the interview with him. This is all on the case study online, but I just thought it'd be useful for you to hear some of them now. So this is always him when I'm saying this. So he says, for me, the key is not just to think about the relation between humans and technology or society and technology, but to think about a triangle between humans, nature, and technology. Because when you start to think about nature in that context, then it completely changes the picture. The more you investigate those supply chains, you see the world's functioning today is not optimized to think about nature. It's just optimized for profit and speed. If you start to think about infrastructures, data centers, and everything, then eventually you get to the mines in Congo or elsewhere on the globe. And then the questions aren't the same anymore, because before it was about privacy, security, data exploitation, this kind of stuff when you're in the West. But when you start to think about it from the position of supply chains, the main problem is a problem of labor and a problem of nature. So he spent some time in India going to investigate illegal mining operations, and then in China. He's been in a village in India where they're managing e-waste, and there was a family and there was a father lying on the bed having tremors because of the fumes, but still continuing to work, continuing to be there because it was his only way of making money. He said the EU are spending millions or billions on this idea that they'll be different to others using AI because theirs will be ethical. But ethical in what segment? Are the data sets going to be ethical? Is it going to include all of those things that are behind all the hidden labor that goes into it? But on the other side, you can say, well, at least the EU is talking about ethical AI in some sense. Others just want practical AI that's useful. And then he said, I think this is probably really useful. The biggest thing I learned is that extending the life of objects is actually the most important. And that relates to something Becky said earlier about the importance of trying to get recycled devices if you can, and then trying to extend their life as long as you can, and then thinking about what you do with your devices once you've kind of finished with them. So the second case study interview we did was with Joanna Moll, who's an amazing artist, and these are artworks or net-based pieces, so you can see them online. I'll put some links in later. But one is called CO2 Door. It's a little bit perhaps out of date now in the data it uses, but it's an amazing idea. So it's a real-time net-based installation that displays the amount of CO2 emitted each second, thanks to global visits of google.com. So you open the web page and then the number will rack up about how much google.com has emitted since you open the web page. Then the next case study interview, the next project of Joanna Moll's that we talked to her about is called Deforest. And it's a net-based piece that shows the number of trees needed to absorb the amount of CO2 generated by global visits to google.com every second. So again, you load up the web page of the artwork, and then these trees just sort of appear across your screen, and it gives you this kind of really felt sense of the impact of things. So here are some of the things that she said to us. I decided that I'd been working with numbers for a long time, trying to calculate emissions and so on, and I felt that I couldn't truly connect with it. Numbers tell you a lot of things, but you can really apprehend what this really means, and that you can't really apprehend what this really means. And that's when Deforest came to life, because I wanted to find a way to do that. I feel that we can all relate to a tree, that we can all understand what this means. We've all seen trees. And it's dramatic how our online world, especially when it comes to data, how invisible it is. She has another project called The Hidden Life of an Amazon User, which was about understanding the connection between labor and energy input and who is paying for what. So as a user, you work for free for these people because they take every single movement and monetize it. But all of these scripts and a lot of this technology are operating in your computer, in your browser. So the user is paying a big proportion of the energy consumption that's actually profiting these companies. And the full environmental impact, but the user doesn't have control over any of these things. In her own work, she tries to reduce the amount of megabytes per page or interaction on her website and her browser-based artworks. And most of her pieces say on them what the emissions of that piece is itself in kind of real time. Okay. Next case study interview I want to talk about was with Carl McDonald, who's an internationally renowned digital artist who did and is doing a lot of work around the environmental impacts of machine learning. So some key things that he said to us, where he talked about his piece that he made called NVIDIA CO2, which is a command line tool for showing real-time CO2 equivalent emissions estimates for the CPU and GPU usage of machine learning that you're doing. Joe will probably explain this better than me, but that's my best attempt. So while you're making an AI project, it will show you in real time what the CO2 emissions are, and you can add that into the tool that you're building with. And it gives that to you in various equivalences. So CI loss per hour, grams of beef consumed, number of light bulbs, and so on. So again, he's trying to make it really sort of visible and visceral and accessible to you. In some senses, it's a site-specific installation because it's in the terminal where the AI researcher is working. He's also started working on a project around offsetting all emissions from crypto art platforms since they began. So these are the art platforms that produce NFTs. The project is still taking shape, but what he's thinking to do is to put an artwork on these platforms that's priced at the total cost of offsetting all of the emissions for the platform that he's selling it on. So he's going to do a collaboration with Tradewater, which is a company that collects and destroys refrigerant canisters, which contain CFCs, which are about 10,000 times more damaging to the atmosphere than CO2. And he's going to make a glass cube that's got a shredded CFC canister inside, and then sell that on the OpenSea marketplace. And the sale price is rerouted to Tradewater, so it can offset everything that platform's done. So it's these artists thinking in really innovative kind of artistic ways about how to approach this problem. One thing he also said was he thinks it's important to identify not just your own emissions, but the other systems that you're complicit in. So to have a kind of a more holistic analysis. I'm going to speed up a little bit because I know I don't have ages, but we did another fascinating case study with Memo Acton, who is another amazing digital artist and who does quite a lot of work around NFTs. And they're very, very trendy now, but they produce a huge amount of e-waste and pollution. Just one or two quotes from that. He says a tweet something like a few grams of CO2, and even watching an hour of Netflix is tens of grams of CO2, whereas an NFT, a non-fungible token, which is kind of an artwork that's sold online, is tons. So it's really orders of magnitude different. He's produced a guide to eco-friendly NFTs, and he explains really clearly in this case study as well how things like Bitcoin lead to very high emissions because the electricity they use, but also how they go through so many devices which are purpose-built to mine Bitcoin and then go defunct in like a week. So they go really quickly. So yeah, recommend checking that out. Just moving on now to some of the ways that we've explored to lower the impact of our own digital projects. So there's a project we have called the Justice Syndicate, which is a piece in which 12 audience members form a jury considering a difficult case, and they receive evidence on iPads. Yeah, we've performed that one like 80 times. It's one of our most successful shows that we've won kind of awards for and things. Yeah, anyway, Joe.
Thanks. So I did some analysis of the energy use for the piece, and we realized that the video syncing system at the heart of the Syndicate platform, which ensures that all the iPads play video at the same time, was the largest source of power consumption. So I rewrote the code in that system to make it more efficient, in particular 26% more energy efficient. And the old system used to rely on communicating consistently between all iPads, so 12 iPads and 10 times a second. So as you can imagine, it's quite a considerable amount of electricity used. And the new system, we actually use artificial intelligence trained in an eco-friendly way, carbon neutral way, in fact, to predict when an iPad would become out of sync, therefore rendering the constant checking redundant and significantly reducing our energy consumption. We've now reached the point where the entire piece uses the equivalent of 10% of the power of boiling a mug of water in a kettle. So we've really reduced the energy consumption of the Justice Syndicate to the bare minimum, and we were trying to push it even further. It's also worth noting with this piece in particular, it tours by train because everything we need can fit easily into 3 very, very heavy but free backpacks, which is very, very useful for us. Perfect.
So Yeah, so Smoking Gun is a piece in which players use their phones to piece together evidence sent to them by an anonymous whistleblower over the course of 5 days and come to a decision. So for that piece, we used a server powered by renewable energy, which I guess is one of the top tips I'd give, is look at your server and look at your email provider. But yeah, you take the rest of this one away, Jack. Go.
Yeah, of course. So one of the key principles for our shows is we try and build everything from scratch. So on our own carbon neutral server, we built our own chat app that is kind of very similar to like a WhatsApp. However, because we built it ourselves, we can remove a lot of elements that aren't needed, therefore making it a lot smaller in size, both physically in size of megabytes, but also the amount of electricity that's used to power it on the device, and also just deliver it via the web. And this entire new piece called Seeker carefully monitors the electricity that is used throughout to make sure that we can benchmark it, we can understand how much electricity is used, and it also gives me a good idea for how I need to improve the application over time. It's now almost carbon neutral. On our side, it's completely carbon neutral. The only remaining carbon that's produced is on the side of the viewer who has the app in the first place when they charge their phone at night. But we're doing a lot of work to make sure that their minimum amount of battery is used, therefore reducing that element even further. We also redesigned our website. One of our aims was to reduce the website's energy footprint, which we've heard a lot about today, to be less than it currently was. The website was running on renewable energy servers already, so it's more about trying to reduce the electricity that's used, even though it's completely green electricity. We wanted to use less of the electricity because honestly, we just can't just waste all the electricity however we like. And one of our things is, now that in fact we've got to carbon neutral, how do we just reduce the electricity that we're using in the first place? Now, until this year, we used a CMS, which is a kind of an easy interface called Ghost. And it's fantastic because it means those who can't program within the organization can make easy content changes, and it can instantly update the website. But there's a problem, which is that CMS produces a lot of additional code that you don't see, that increases the electricity use because it's just larger, the platform is a bit bigger. And it would be really great if we could just take all that away and just edit HTML ourselves, but that's actually particularly difficult for anyone who doesn't have programming background. So I would just be the only one who could edit the website, which wasn't useful for us. So what I did is I used a language called Jekyll, which is a clever tool that takes the kind of complicated HTML and CSS, but turns it into something called Markdown. So Markdown makes it much easier because it's almost like text editing, but just a little bit more advanced. So very quickly, with a bit of an intro, Dan and Rachel learned Markdown, and suddenly we're able to produce incredibly low energy usage websites, far, far lower than it was before, which is a significant progress for us. And what's really nice about that is we don't lose any of the aesthetics. It still looks beautiful. It still conforms to everything we want to do, but it has the overheads and the page size that is very, very minimal compared to what we used to have.
Cool. Shall I stop sharing screen now, Joe, and you can share the tool?
Yes, that sounds fantastic. Thank you, Dan. So now I'm going to talk about the network condition tool. I'm just going to share this so you can see it. There we go. Fantastic. So this is the network condition tool. This is the kind of final part of our talk. And it was built as part of the network condition project to help other artists and organizations plan the digital elements of their projects and process it in a way that minimizes the carbon footprint. It's designed to really highlight those hidden costs and try and make them more transparent so you can understand how certain elements of your work might be leading to a larger carbon footprint than others. Should be something that's a good planning tool. So I'm going to quickly give you an overview of it. This will be very brief, but if anyone wants to look at this themselves, the URL is thenetworkcondition.com, which is available at any point. And again, of course, is running on 100% carbon neutral servers. So if we enter, we can then go through a series of questions. They're very small questions, it's 2 pages, and it's designed to give an overview of the project that you're currently thinking about creating. And this could be used as a tool to plan. It could also be used as a tool to evaluate your own artwork or artwork that you're about to host within a specific setting if you're a venue. So we might talk about how long it takes to create the artwork in days, if you use a laptop or a computer or a tablet when creating the artwork, These questions are a little bit vague, but they're specifically designed to highlight certain elements that have a large amount of footprint compared to a small amount of footprint. So it can be estimates, but as long as you keep it roughly accurate, you will get a good idea of the carbon footprint you're creating. We talk about how many computers we use during the creation of the artwork, if they're small devices or desktops. It's quite surprising, but it makes a huge difference if you're using something like a laptop, which is a small device, in comparison to a large desktop computer. Meetings, something that we're in a lot of nowadays. How many people, how long they were, and also whether or not meetings were conducted physically or online, because online is a very common occurrence nowadays. Let's say nothing, because they were online. Perfect. And then we jump to the second page, which is largely about live streaming technology, something that's very important to a lot of people at the moment. So we might talk about how long live streaming technologies were, how many people attended, how many did they deliver, the hours of which that you use the server. We've talked about servers quite a lot. It makes a significant difference. And perhaps on small devices and for how many hours they were used. Fantastic. And once you've answered those basic questions, you get a nice overview, and the overview is supposed to give you a rough idea of how much carbon you produced during the development and also the exhibition or production of your artwork. And again, this is an estimate, but the important part is it's highlighting those elements which are actually very hard to compute and understand if you're trying to just put it all together by yourself, to give you a rough idea of what this kind of equates to. And we'll have a look at, for example, it's within a diesel car, how far you went. And you can also figure out what I find this particularly useful, if the development is the particularly heavy footprint, or if it's actually the delivery itself. And then you can make quite a lot of good changes and informed changes after that. You can view the source of where we got these figures as well. At any time, these figures are all designed or taken from government sources, which are attributed. It's remarkably difficult to do that, so we have listed the sources if you want to look at that yourselves. And it also gives you some good ideas and estimations of where you might want to consider changing certain elements or habits. So for example, going from small platforms, small devices, one large device rather, to many small devices, or moving online meetings to physical, or vice versa. So that's a very, very brief overview of the network condition, but I really suggest just loading it up, having a go yourself, throwing in some figures, and really having a look at the kind of carbon footprint that you can calculate with the tool. Perfect. I'm just going to hand it back to you, Dan.
Cool. So I just wanted to finish, I guess, if you wanted some kind of easy wins, I guess mine would be try and find a server that uses renewable energy, and there are some links to some once you've used the tool there. Try and find an email system that's powered on renewable energy. Try to buy recycled devices, use them for as long as you can, and then recycle them at the end. And I guess if you're thinking about video tools, it seems that Microsoft Teams and GatherTown, which is an amazing program, are more carbon friendly than other available online meeting platforms. So yeah, that's just some easy wins if that's kind of useful to have. But yeah, I'm aware that we've gone on for slightly longer than we were meant to, so apologies about that, Victoria.
Not at all. That was really fascinating. Thanks, Dan and Joe. It's all so useful. It's just great to have something so practical that I don't know. I can certainly relate to all of that stuff, and I'm definitely going to be using the tool.